Greetings, wise acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to the archives. When it comes to the era of the Empire and the Great Galactic Civil War, most of the focus is rested entirely on the events that happened between the Rebels and the Empire, especially during the period after the Death Star was destroyed and Vader's hunt for Luke, his desire to know the truth about the boy being insatiable. However, the events that happen in each of the three movies are quite spaced in the timeline, leaving plenty of room for smaller, more unknown events to occur without public knowledge. Ironically, it is some of these smaller events that can be sometimes even more surprising and interesting than the Civil War itself. And today, we will be looking at the surprisingly powerful clone of Darth Vader. Today's holocron comes from the Legends novel Galaxy of Fear, Clones, in which Vader discovers ancient Jedi ruins which use his DNA to create a carbon copy of the Dark Lord, a Sith that begins to terrorize the residents of the planet until Vader deals with it personally. So acolytes, let's go ahead and open the holocron and get started. The tale begins on the world of Dantooine, where Vader arrives with a detachment of stormtroopers in order to investigate an old Jedi temple, an ancient site of great knowledge that has been untouched for thousands of years. That was until the rebellion decided to make it their base camp. Vader had gone to this place because he knew it was where the rebellion had last set up their base before they disappeared yet again. Not to mention, after the destruction of the Death Star, Sidious had decided to take the rebels more seriously and ordered that Vader go off and explore some old Jedi sites in an attempt to find something that they could use against the Alliance, perhaps some old ancient Jedi knowledge. The Vader that we encounter in this time period is very heavily invested in the rebellion and the idea of a son. Though we know that Vader typically doesn't care much about ancient Jedi or even Sith history the way that Palpatine does, what he does care about is this war. War is Darth Vader's natural element, and after 19 years of passivity, the Dark Lord, like a ravenous predator, smelled blood. On Dantooine, Vader approaches the temple and probes around it to find the hidden entrance. At last, he simply reaches out with the Force in order to locate the door. With several hard shoves of dark-side energies, shatters right through it. Vader and his squad then enter the abandoned base. Suddenly though, the old security system activates and senses the violent intrusion, thus setting off a booby trap. All around the group, from small slots in the walls and ceilings, blaster fire began to rain down on them. The stormtrooper squad that was with Vader in the temple was instantly gunned down. Not a single survivor, but Vader had sensed the blasters a millisecond before they fired and ignited his crimson blade. As Vader was deflecting the blaster bolts, one of the many within the hundreds in the volley managed to slip past his guard and clip him on his right shoulder beneath his armor. And in a rare moment, blood was drawn. Angered, with the swipe of Vader's right hand, he reached out with the dark side and disabled all the blasters, likely using the Sith technique of Machu Daru, or the ability to impact technology, something that he knew as a Jedi. But now, a question is raised. Why would an ancient Jedi temple have such a terrifying security system? Though it is not addressed within the novel, we think it is because this temple on Dantooine might have been one of the ancient outposts refurbished and used by the Jedi of Revan's era when they were forced out of the world of Coruscant. We know that Dantooine was Revan's main home for a time during his battles with Malak, and using their old structures as bases. And perhaps it was Revan and his followers that laid out these security systems. But back to the main lore. This drop of blood from Vader landed on the floor of the temple, but before Vader could delve any further, he was stopped by one of the Imperial officers, the officer who indicated that they had found another rebel outpost. While Vader was curious about the temple and what it was protecting, he decided that the rebellion was a far more important task. So with full intent on returning, Vader left the temple to attend to the rebellion. Little did he know that the insignificant drop of blood would be used for a strange experiment within the still working cloning facility inside this ancient temple. Within its walls, there were droids that had been active for thousands of years, just following the native programming. The droids had witnessed Vader in action, and they took the sample of his blood and ran it through the cloning procedure. The whole process was done in less than a few days, creating a clone of Anakin Skywalker and then dressing him in a costume that resembled Vader's armor. Using a strange secret technique, the droids were able to imprint Vader's personality and memories onto this new clone, attempting to make a perfect copy. The clone, though, was incredibly flawed. just as all the other clones that stemmed from this ancient facility. The novel goes on to follow a group of native Dantonians that faced the horrors and struggles of the clones for themselves. One of them was in fact Force sensitive, and now could sense a growing dark side within the walls and ruins of the temple. The Jedi Temple itself had become tainted with the dark side, so that all the clones they produced turned out to be evil versions of the originals. And finally, the clone of Anakin, Vader, was revealed. Though the group originally thought that this was the real Vader, she deduced that something was off when observing the armor. The armor, like we said earlier, was merely a costume. None of its parts actually worked or functioned in any kind of way. It was all just a cheap imitation. Imitation made from the scrap of rebel starfighters laying around the temple. The clone, though, even had a lightsaber, but it was just as cheaply made and was an imposter of the original design. It was nothing more than a beam of light which passed harmlessly through any solid matter. However, the clone Vader believed that it was real, and in fact believed he himself was the real Dark Lord. The clone was imperfect, but it was still massively powerful, stemming from the DNA of the Chosen One. But because of this, it was unnaturally aggressive and moved impulsively, not thinking things through, but just lunging at its prey like a hungry predator, screaming at them all the while. It only attempted to use its lightsaber once, but following this, used its bare hands and enhanced physical strength to bludgeon any enemies. When the real Darth Vader returned, he was surprised when he saw the clone of himself within the ruins, especially since it was wearing a copy of his own armor. Both Vaders immediately squared off, but despite the clone declaring that he was the real Vader, it quickly became apparent that one thing separated the two of them, that being their true power in the Force, and more importantly, their command over it. What was revealed, though, is that its powers in the Force were minuscule. It had been tainted by the dark side, but it never truly knew how to touch it. And needless to say, the battle between the real and the false Vader did not last very long, showcasing the clone's failure to manipulate the Force. This is a flaw that we see constantly in canon clones. In the end, the real Vader triumphed by throwing his clone to the ground and plunging his lightsaber deep within his chest. In the process of this whole ordeal, the cloning facility was destroyed, leaving the mission amounting to nothing. Vader, however, reflected on this experience and determined that the Emperor would be very interested in learning of the events. It is an unfortunate thing, but we don't actually ever get to know the history of the cloning facility deep within the Jedi Temple. The novel itself is very short, being only around 90 pages, and intended to be more of a quick read. There's so much lore and implication around this ancient temple though, not only knowing the cloning procedures of ancient Jedi, but even deciding to construct one themselves, and one that operated autonomously. Using droids and what we assume to be the power of the Force, the Jedi were able to make a facility within their temple that would make clones without anybody operating it. It's made very apparent why the rebellion didn't use this to their advantage, since all the clones that came from it were pure evil. But there's also the fact that made the rebel higher-ups remember the Clone Wars, and the whole idea of mass-producing soldiers, organic or droid, was just a bad idea. It left a bad taste in their mouth, especially when all the clone troopers of the Empire suddenly turned on the Jedi. It isn't ever explained why ancient Jedi who built this facility decided to do so, but we invite all of you to speculate with us in the comments below, and let us know if you'd like to see us cover the other books in the Galaxy of Fear. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.